Well, thank you very much. It's a great honour to be here, and we've already heard some very inspiring speeches. And now we are moving on to a discussion phase. And I am moderating. So I haven't met all the panelists before. This is the first opportunity, so hello. It's a great opportunity for everybody in the audience to network and to benefit from the experience of our people on the stage, and to ask questions and to debate, and to show that courage that Natalia was talking about, and to think out, go beyond the comfort zone, which I thought was a very good message from Natalia. Anyway, without any further ado, I have a series of questions somewhere, and we will start off. Is the idea to open the floor to the audience first, or shall I invite the panel to?
Well,
first of all,
the panel.
Right. Okay.
I think we can introduce you to, maybe we'll talk a bit about
Okay.
specific.
Okay, fine. So the first question I'd like to put to the panel, and then could open it up to the floor, is what is a startup ecosystem? What does that mean? And what are the important components of a startup ecosystem? I don't know who would like to go first. John?
Hi. Perhaps you'd like to know why we're here individually. My name's John Norton. I'm from the United States. I have had a long career in academics and an even longer career in business, where I was associated with a lot of startup activity. I'm here as a Fulbright specialist, and I'm working with the School of Business and Management of Technology at Belarusian State University. The thing that you just asked about, the creation of a startup community, or the elements of a startup community, how many people have read Brad Feld's book of that title, Startup Communities? Brad has a wonderful book that outlines a lot of what he believes are the correct things to have in a startup community. And there are many. Universities have a part to play. And the people at Belarusian State University intend to make that university a place where you not only learn about entrepreneurship, but a place where you actually go to start a business. It's a community that's open. It's a community with porous boundaries, with very ambiguous leadership. My experience in Kansas City was that there was an organization that wanted to be the focal point for all entrepreneurial activity. We learned that entrepreneurs are not herd animals, and they don't do that very well. So it's hard to make a single focal point for all the entrepreneurial activity. Brad talks about the principle of inclusiveness. Whoever wants to play can play. So when a new player comes into the game, you invite him into the game and you let him play. In Brad's view, and I think I agree with him, it's the entrepreneurs who need to lead the entrepreneurial community. You need to do it. You guys are the heroes. We are helpers. We're feeders into the system. The universities, the venture capitalists, the people who provide services to you. All of those are the feeders to the system. But you guys, the founders, are the ones that are really the leaders and have to be the leaders in the entrepreneurial community. I think I've spoken long enough.
Yeah, so I guess, well, my name is Gary Stewart. I work with Wayra. So Wayra is Telefonica's initiative. We invest in startups around the world. We have 14 accelerators around the world. mostly in Latin America and also in Europe. And I ran originally the academies in Barcelona, Madrid, and now I run the space in London. So if any of you guys are entrepreneurs looking to come to London, we also invest in the startups, usually up to a maximum of about £150,000 at a kind of very, very early stage. So that's kind of who I am. I think that in terms of the different elements of a startup ecosystem, I would say that it really depends on, like, everyone has a role to play. So I would say government has a role to play in terms of making sure that the laws that are in place are entrepreneur friendly. So for example, when I lived in Spain, there were a lot of laws that actually made bankruptcy or failure of a startup something that you could never ever escape. So changing those kinds of laws, making sure that the laws are friendly to entrepreneurs would be one thing. As we said before, I think that the key to everything would be the entrepreneurs themselves. So you need to have an ecosystem where people feel that the best and the brightest don't only have to become lawyers and doctors, they can also become entrepreneurs, and that being the next Mark Zuckerberg or whomever is something that people should aspire to. I think you also need companies to play a role, in the sense that companies usually can provide startups with distribution channels or other resources that can be really useful in terms of helping the startups to scale. Obviously, universities as well need to be well equipped so that they help entrepreneurs to gain the practical, not just the academic knowledge, but the practical experiences, so that they can try ideas and, fail if necessary, but also learn from those experiences. So I would say that an ecosystem is one in which there are lots of different segments, all working together with a common aim, which I guess would be helping young, talented entrepreneurs to be able to realize their dreams and therefore serve as the basis for economic development.
Thank you. Tania, would you like to?
Sure, I think it's kind of a broad question. Do you want me to comment on what we do specifically with the startups, or?
Well, we've heard so far the importance of a culture of entrepreneurship and people having the courage to go down that route as opposed to a more traditional route. And we've heard about the role of government and encouraging the right legislative environment, and existing companies to support startups. So these are all features of a healthy ecosystem. I wondered if you had anything to add to that.
Sure. So let me introduce myself very briefly. I'm Natalia Corobco. I'm the Country Business Development Manager for Google in Belarus. For me, it's a little bit theoretical to talk about what is in a startup ecosystem. I can give example of what I believe is a cool ecosystem. I was reading about, before coming here, I was checking my emails and going through my usual morning news feed. And I was reading about Android, and I was thinking on the way here what a cool ecosystem Android is, because there are so many startups that came into existence around Android. Part of this was due to the fact that it's an open source system, something that anybody can easily access, take on, and create around, and produce a great product that is easily monetizable. So I think one of the characteristics of a good ecosystem is transparency, open source, access to technology, and a platform that anybody can easily use and monetize.
Okay, thank you. Is it
Stan.
Stan?
Yeah.
Stan, would you like to add to anything?
So my name's Stan. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Venture Day Minsk. I'm from GiveVision. We're working with smart glasses that give sight to blind people. I have a panel later on to talk exactly what we do, so I'm not going to take any more time on this. But just to add to a couple of points that we mentioned here regarding what is a startup ecosystem, I think from a startup perspective, and we were part of Wayra Accelerator for a year and a half now, well, we experienced important things on top of obviously, being an entrepreneur and having entrepreneurial culture and having an idea is, of course, access to capital. There's abundance of capital, for example, in London, which makes it much easier to fund your ideas, find investors, and keep the startups going. And that's an important factor. Number two is access to talent. Do we have people that we need to grow our business, especially local So do we have software engineers in our case? Do we have hardware engineers if we were to produce hardware? That was an important factor. And Gary mentioned about the legislation. I think this is a very, very important factor. As it is with Britain, for example, we have very limited regulation in terms of, like there's very little obstacles to start a business, which makes it much easier. And there's just very few barriers to open a business, as well as to all the other appreciation of how important is the community of other entrepreneurs. Very often people think, well, we're going to join the accelerator, there's going to be mentors, they're going to tell us how to run things, and they're going to give us advice and put us in touch with someone. But in reality, from our cohort at least, and my fellow entrepreneurs in the cohort, Wayra invests about 25 businesses every year within London Accelerator. Majority of opportunities and knowledge and know-how and advice came from fellow entrepreneurs, because it's just a cohort of super bright, motivated young people who already have connections, probably raised or raising investments, so they have contacts to investors and they have ideas and technology understanding. And it's so important. And I think what you guys are doing with I'm a Guru, it's so important. We're bringing startups together to be able to share the knowledge, and that enables collaborations and the whole sort of opportunities out there. So that's my 5 cents around that.
Well, just a few words to add. Well, actually, to me, there are 4 pillars any ecosystem is based on, like education, mentorship, access to capital, which was already mentioned. To me, one of the most important things is mentality, culture, entrepreneurial culture. When it's kind of considered weird in the society to start up, when it's really you're kind of thinking what my parents will be thinking or what my friends will think when I found a venture, that's not the ecosystem yet. So the ecosystem should encourage anyone willing to do things different. And that's, I think, what Silicon Valley does, or I believe London as the top ecosystem, European ecosystem does. So, and that's, we as Belarus ecosystem, and I'm a guru here, we're trying to build, we're trying to transform and change the mentality first of all, because as a private entity, I'm a guru. I don't think we can really change the legal framework or venture capital ecosystem, or we're trying to organize networking events and bring international speakers and kind of connect Belarus startups to the global completely different culture. That's what we're doing.
I think, can I just jump in here so we have a bit more of a discussion?
Okay.
I completely agree with that, because we can talk about challenges and the problems and the fact that there's maybe not all of these characteristics of a perfect ecosystem in Belarus, but you have to try. And you have to challenge yourself. And now it's so easy. I will have to disagree with the previous speaker about the fact that you need to know all the data, that you need to have a specific plan, that it has to be all written out, and you have to have all the answers. That's not necessarily true. And we see this from some of the companies that were started 10 years ago that are starting today. It's so easy. The internet is out there. It's for everyone. You can be any age in any country with any kind of idea or resources. You can be in the village and starting up a business, because it doesn't cost anything. You just need to be smart. You need to be a risk taker and an entrepreneur. So I prefer to talk about the opportunities and that exist in Belarus and the small people that are here, rather than think about, what are the problems and how do we fix all of those problems.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, talent is here. Talent is here in the audience. So that's a big opportunity for all of us. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Okay. Well, before I do have another question to move on to, but before I do, does any of the audience want to make any comment about what we've heard so far? I could just sum up. Question was, what is a startup ecosystem? What are the components? And what I've noted down here, you need entrepreneurs, so you need people who've got the courage of their conviction to try it. You need a good legislative environment that helps. So the government's got a role to play. Existing companies giving startups a bit of a leg up, to help them along. You also, through education, universities, colleges, academic institutions, allowing people the space for a bit of trial and error, to give some sort of practical experimentation. Also, we've heard about access to capital helps as well, and a place where you can cross-fertilize ideas. I've noted down here. So, a forum where people can come together, which is what I'm a Guru is offering here, and also the right mentality. So you need people who are going to take risks, who are going to move out their comfort zone. So those were the key things that I've picked up. I wondered if the audience wanted to make any comment about any of that.
Questions, maybe?
Sorry.
Maybe
It's a good
questions?
thing to think that all the problems are
Comment or
Belarus,
question,
but
yeah, of course.
the debate is also happening, the debate about startups and how to build a successful ecosystem is also happening in Europe. It's not just something that we're talking about today here in Minsk, and this is what I get a lot from our partners in Belarus. There's always the sense that Belarus is really kind of behind and it's disadvantaged in some way. But Europe, the whole of Europe has the same dilemma. How do we overcome the stigma of failure? How do we get more people to take the initiative? How do we create the right environment on the legislative side? These are all topics that are relevant not just for Belarus and the way people operate here, but also for Europe as a whole. So maybe we can talk about that.
Would anybody like to be brave and make any comment?
There
or
was a question
with
there.
well, I couldn't
Fiona.
see. Where?
There is a question there.
My name is Natalia, I'm from Ukraine. It's very interesting to see the Belarus ecosystem. It's my first time here. And actually, I'm working on building the ecosystem in Marinich in Odessa and in Ukraine, in one. And my question is, you mentioned the private sector, like I'm a Blue Hub. You mentioned the entrepreneurs making videos, and you mentioned the universities and colleges for the development of the system. But what would be efforts, and how do you connect with the government on this? Because it's a very big question now. I think in all the countries, and we have different backgrounds, all of them. And maybe we can discuss this aspect as well. Thank you.
Okay, well, maybe we'll take a couple of questions together before I put them to the panel. And in fact, that question links into the next question in a way, which is what are the particular challenges in Eastern Europe, and how can they be overcome?
So I think that the point that you made before is really, really good, because I think pretty much every ecosystem outside of Silicon Valley thinks that it's behind schedule. I mean, I think that if you go to New York, which is where I'm from originally, people in New York think that they're behind Silicon Valley. So it's not a question of, East versus West or whatever the case may be. It's a point is there's one example of an ecosystem that's working really, really well, and everyone else trying to figure out how they can kind of create their version of it. I think your point was also really good, because if you go to Brussels and start speaking to the people there, they're spending a lot of time as well trying to figure out how you can kind of create a more dynamic European ecosystem, because there are a lot of these issues that are going across nations. And you can find the same thing as well in China or in India. So again, it's just this international thing. I would think that to your question as to like how government can be more relevant, what I saw in the example of Spain is government, first of all, has to kind of get rid of all of the laws that are that create a chilling effect on entrepreneurship, that kind of disincentivize or punish entrepreneurs that are unsuccessful in their ventures. They have to understand that you're taking a risk, and so the government needs to reward people who take risks, not punish people who take risks, because if you do that, then you can never actually have an entrepreneurial culture. And I think that once in Spain, what they or in other ecosystems, what they've done as well, is then to say, okay, well, government also has a lot of money. So the reason why Telefonica in Spain got involved in Wayra was because at that point, the country had about 47% youth unemployment and 27% general unemployment. So the question was, if you have a company like Telefonica that's making so much money and that's benefiting from its relationship with the government, then shouldn't Telefonica be doing something? And also Telefonica has an incentive because of the fact that we need to create an ecosystem as well where we have talented people to work in technology companies so we can compete with the Americans, et cetera. So that was the reason why the government said, okay, well, why don't we come up with a match funding approach? If you put in 100 million, we'll put in 100 million to support entrepreneurship, but instead of having government officials be the ones to try and manage the program, because no offense to anyone who's from the government, usually that doesn't work out because they simply don't have the skill sets or the knowledge or expertise necessary to be able to understand entrepreneurial ecosystems. So they said to Telefonica, well, you guys actually understand the digital space better than we do. Why don't you guys take the lead? And if you put your money up, we'll put our money up. And that's how kind of Wayra was generated from the beginning. And we're doing the same thing not only in Spain, but also you see the same thing with governments all around Latin America. So I would say government does have a very important role to play. They are taking taxpayers' money. They should be using it for some sort of efficient end, which is kind of regenerating or generating economic development through entrepreneurship. And yeah, there are a lot of different models that show how they can do that. Israel's another great example of how the government has a very active role in terms of stimulating the entrepreneurial ecosystem, but they do it because they understand and it's a kind of long-term strategy to make sure the country stays relevant.
Perhaps if I just may add here, especially because of the current situation in Ukraine at the moment, and in general within Eastern Europe, my perception is it's maybe not really wise to expect the government to do much. Maybe the priorities are not there, etc. However, if we look at successful examples of other clusters, such as even Silicon Valley, it didn't appear because of particular government incentive or particular government policy. And what Gary just mentioned about the role of big business as something that you actually might likely to influence in really being a catalyst force in encouraging the ecosystem is really powerful. So we, even within the US, we know that the whole Silicon Valley started from Fairchild Semiconductor company that became Intel, and then they all span out across the valley. I know with Microsoft, I think Bill Gates was the guy who, he sponsored first class of computers within Harvard, where Sergey Brin and Larry Page started Google, and that was just a few years after he actually sponsored opening that. So there's a lot of stories where big businesses like Telefonica and Amazon, Microsoft could really do a lot to help, especially a lot of the Italian people to start in these clusters. I think that's, yeah.
Yeah, I think we can, what governments in Belarus, for example, what we can do is look at countries, for example, with the highest share of venture capital deals in the last couple of years, which are in Europe, for example, this is the UK, this is Germany, Israel, Sweden. What are these countries and what are these governments doing to stimulate venture capital deals, to stimulate startup development, and just steal some of their ideas and replicate them in other places. I think also, as was already mentioned, companies like Google, like Microsoft, organizations like USAID, I think what we can be doing on our end is informing the government and helping government officials understand how some of these technologies and how some of these startups work, so that they can then make the right decisions on legislation and improve legislation to simplify business.
I agree with that last comment particularly, and I think the question's really important. In the United States, all the net new job growth comes from young companies. Companies more than 5 years old, according to studies by the Kauffman Foundation, destroy more jobs than they create. That's been true for the last 20 or so years. And all of the net new jobs come from young companies, not necessarily huge companies, but young companies. Policymakers need to be aware of that. If what you're going to do is influence, government isn't a thing, it's a bunch of people. You're going to influence the people who make the decisions that make this, that enable your work or get in its way. They need to know what the facts are of what you're doing and why you're doing it and why it matters. So do your work and let them know what you're doing and let them know what you need.
Well, thank you. Maybe I can just articulate one of the most important messages all of us have here in Belarus to our government. Well, many entrepreneurs here just say like to the government, let us do things, just let us do things. And I mean, we don't expect here any support from the government. And the reason is like the government simply doesn't understand. And I believe it's really important what Natalia said right now. It's important from our part to educate, to help the government understand things, understand startups, understand different culture. But I believe it's really possible only when there is a platform for, like this one, for example, for open discussion. And I mean, I wish the government is here. The government representatives are here to understand us, just to hear us. And that's the way to go ahead and to move forward. And please, Gary, can you talk a bit about Pitched Palace? And that, I think, is a great example from UK. The way government not just encourages entrepreneurs, but communicates with entrepreneurs, best startups.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so I mean, I think that it's not only the UK, but I'll give that example. I think that around the world, especially after the Kauffman Foundation came up with that first study, I think it was back in 2008 or whenever, about kind of the way that all net job growth comes from new companies, you saw around the world a whole bunch of initiatives. I think one of the first ones was Startup Chile. You saw then kind of like they did something in the US, Startup USA, and then we had Startup Britain, et cetera, et cetera. So after that, then what you started to see around kind of the world is a lot of people, very influential people kind of starting to support startups. So when I was in Spain, for example, you saw the King of Spain all of a sudden taking off his tie and going to startup events to try and support entrepreneurs and talking about how important entrepreneurship was there. In the UK, you saw government taking kind of lots of even more proactive roles by kind of creating laws that actually incentivized people to become business angels. So they changed the laws to make sure that if you have a little bit of extra cash, you can actually invest in a startup, and there are tax incentives for you to do so. Then you saw the royal family also getting involved as well. So the Duke of York, Prince Andrew, decided that he wanted to launch something called Pitch at the Palace. And what Pitch at the Palace is, basically he says, well, I can kind of bring together a lot of really, really influential people, high net worth people, people who are CEOs of companies, because they'll be excited just to get into Buckingham Palace or St. James's Palace and be able to hang out with him. You know, those are kind of the people he hang out with generally, who generally don't associate with startup founders. So what he tries to do is to kind of find the best startups in the country and have them pitch at St. James's Palace to this audience of 300 to 400 kind of super exclusive high net worth people. And they've done about 6 iterations of this already, which is really, really cool because it generates a lot of attention for the startups. Even in the case of our Wayra startups, we had this one company that got a Czech investor, and the Czech investor was more impressed by the fact that they had been participants in Pitch at the Palace than by the fact that they had gone through the accelerator program, which shows that using the luster of royalty or whatever the case may be, or of these different institutions, can be really useful. You also see, for example, recently we went to China, and you saw that the Chinese government and the British government have decided that they're going to work together on creating tech hubs. So the Chinese government is going to spend a bunch of money creating a tech hub with the UK government in Shenzhen, with the idea of allowing both Chinese entrepreneurs to access the British market and vice versa. So you see a lot of things happening all around the world with governments at the very highest level, and also people like the royals getting involved as well.
And just to mention, by the way, Pitch at Palace will be organized for the first time in our region in May at Latitude in Tallinn. I mean, in our region here in the Baltics, in Tallinn, in Estonia. I think it's May 29th. Yeah, Latitude 59, one of the biggest, largest conferences here in the region.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Any further comments or questions? No, I don't see any hands up. Okay, we've heard some very exciting initiatives that are going on around the world, in the UK. Thank you for sharing those, Gary. What can I ask, in this region, what would be, you just mentioned the conference that's happening next month, but what other, I mean, there's no royal family in Belarus. What other main incentives or programs are there in this region in Eastern Europe which could help startups? Because you've talked about the important role government can play, or very important key figures in the community. Can the panel comment on anything?
Sure, I can talk a little bit about Campus Warsaw. How many of you are familiar with Campus Warsaw? Raise your hand. 2 people. Wow, this is depressing. So Campus Warsaw is a regional initiative that was launched at the beginning of this year. It's now open to startups from the entire region of Central and Eastern Europe, and it's modeled, it's a global Google project. We have 6 of these campuses now around the world, in London, in Sao Paulo, Tel Aviv, now one in Warsaw that is specifically targeted to startups from, like you. They have programs, courses, mentoring on a weekly and daily basis. Please check it out. You can search for it online, sign up, or go to Warsaw and hang out with some cool people, get some ideas, and possibly even participate in a demo day. So that's something that we do regionally.
Thank you. I hope people will check that out. It's amazing only 2 people have put their hand up in the audience. Would any other members of the panel like to make any comment?
Well, I think it's to mention, various events happening here in the region. And I mentioned already Latitude. Login is another great event, and I see Lithuanian representatives here. So, Login is when exactly? It's also in May, yeah? Yeah, it's in May, and usually we organize a sort of bus tour to Login. I hope we'll be able to do it this year, so please join us in our initiatives. But again, the idea is to be open, to discuss, to communicate, to be open to new ideas, and to meet excellent speakers, Login and Latitude, and we here invite just to make you like. To give you some energy, I would like to see more questions from your side. Just please be active. It's really important. Like we discuss, we are here to help you to start up and to grow your company, to take it to the next level. There is a distinguished panel of experts. Please Thank you. Raise your hands, and ask questions.
Really sorry to interrupt. Just pointing here, you said about the local events. Mm-hmm. I really would not understand why would London not be a local event for you? Because for you to fly to Warsaw would be almost the same time to get to London. Exactly. London is very local, and as well as Spain or Germany, Berlin. Maybe there are not going to be many Russian-speaking entrepreneurs, but it doesn't matter for you. A lot of the top technology companies and a lot of other startups will be there, and this is very local. Stop thinking Minsk and Baltics. Start thinking Europe. It's within 2-hour flight for all of you guys.
Exactly. Europe is local. It's just, and the problem here, and I shared this with my team. Like when we are here in Minsk, like we physically feel like there are boundaries, borders. In Belarus, and that's kind of maybe because of the country mentality. I don't know. Like just when you cross the border and you're in Vilnius, which is 100 miles from here, from Minsk, you feel like it's a different world. And we're Europeans in Vilnius, and here we're Belarusians, and that's I think something we have to embrace, this challenge, and to change with time. Yeah, there was a question there.
Okay. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. Hello, my name is Nikita. My question is, what's your general approach to legal I'm here to legal part of startup process, because young companies, when they're at the seed stage or the early stage, if they want to go international, they should spend a ton of money on lawyers. And what do you think? How this could be made more easy, more cheap for companies if they don't fund it yet? Yeah, thank you.
Maybe we should ask the lawyers in the room. I can see at least one.
So as I mentioned probably in the article a couple of days ago, you don't need to be even in the United Kingdom to open a company in the United Kingdom. So you can today log into gov.uk, and I'm sorry if I shouldn't be saying that, but you can legally, and that's legal, register a company in the United Kingdom. The fee is about, what, 20 euros? You don't need a passport, you don't need to send you don't need any lawyers, you just fill in the application form and you receive your documents. Problem might be if you want to open a business bank account in London, you might need some sort of a physical address, but it's certainly not hefty fees for lawyers. I don't know about the US, Gary, maybe you can comment on that, but in London is probably, yeah, so it's much easier than you might think.
I mean, I think that a lot of it depends on the kind of company that you're trying to create and whether or not this is a company that at some point you expect to fund with international venture capital. If that's the case, then it makes sense from the very beginning to set up the company either in the US or in the UK, just because those are jurisdictions that kind of every investor is willing to accept. If you set up a company in a foreign jurisdiction that is really unknown to a lot of investors, they're going to force you at some later point to switch it, to flip it to a US company or a UK company, just so that they are comfortable with the legals of the situation. And I think, like Stan said, a lot of it is set up so that you can do it online, and there are even companies now like Stripe, I haven't used them, but they're doing stuff so that you'll be able to kind of basically set up accounts and all of that kind of stuff in the US through their platform. So people are already figuring out ways that you can kind of collect money in the US or set up companies really quickly online.
Yeah, because law is such a big part of entrepreneurship, I can tell you a thing that we did in the United States at a university where I worked. We set up an entrepreneurship law center, and it was specifically to help people with startups. And practicing attorneys worked with law school students, in our case fourth-year law school students, because it takes 4 years, to advise young companies pro bono. There was no charge for this, up to a certain level. They couldn't prosecute a patent for you, that sort of thing, things that took a lot of work. They wouldn't give you that kind of time for free, but they would advise you about contracts and startup agreements, and there's a lot of areas of law. We had a lot of volunteer lawyers, 40 or so, that gave their time to help. We intend to start such a process here in Minsk at BSU if we can get it going. It's a little premature right now to talk about it, but we recognize certainly that the law is a big part of kind of the process that you have to go through, and at least in the U.S., it's a very necessary part of the process.
I think also in Belarus there are already enough success stories and companies that have gone global, and some of the founders and the people that run these companies, I'm sure they would be perfectly ready to share their experience and where they're registered and how they did it, and how they managed to avoid problems with the authorities once the business started to scale. I think we kind of underestimate the value of sharing, and the fact that people in most cases will actually be willing to share. We just need to ask.
Thank you. There must be some more comments or questions from the audience about your experiences so far, what obstacles you've hit, how you might have overcome those obstacles. Does anybody wish to share any thoughts or comments or their experience?
Fiona, just to come back to the question that was, just one point that was raised earlier about mentality. Tania mentioned this. I think this is one of the things that I find really striking in Belarus. People are so critical of themselves. And for example, when I compare to the mentality to Polish mentality, in Poland, a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs tend to think domestic. They think about the Polish market and what they can be doing in Poland. In Belarus, I really need a lot of people who are thinking internationally. They create things, products that are designed to be international. So this is something that we can also think about, and yeah.
You're encouraged by the outward-looking mentality here.
I don't think it needs to be, we can encourage it, but I think it's already there. We just need to...
You are encouraged. You are encouraged by
yes,
it.
I am. I'm inspired by it.
Yes,
Inspired by the people that I talk to in Belarus that have been successful.
Mm-hmm. You were going to make a comment or a question.
Hello? Oh, right, you hear me. That's great. So, hello, my name is Alexandra. I'm from startup Kokoyo. And so the question is, we slightly touched the topic of universities and startups. And I would like to ask you about this collaboration between universities and startups. Because as I see, there are a lot of actually startups that think that they could collaborate with universities and then that would give them a great start. But I haven't heard a lot of success stories with collaboration with universities. So probably you can share some ideas and experience with us how we can collaborate with students and professors to reach our aims. So I know that it depends, all of this depends on the topic of startup and the idea and whatever, but so probably you could share some thoughts with us.
Well, I think the place that Tatiana and I actually met at the beginning was at IE Business School. So that was a university setting or a business school setting where they were trying to really kind of focus on entrepreneurship. And I think now at Wayra in the UK, we have partnerships with Oxford and Cambridge. And I think that basically the best practice there is simply that we try to target the entrepreneurship clubs because you already have kind of a population of people who are saying we want to be entrepreneurs and we have projects, and then we just try and figure out how we can kind of help to plug them into our ecosystem, how we can mentor the students so that they can essentially kind of not make a lot of dumb mistakes. They can basically use us as a resource to kind of answer some of the questions that they may have. If they're looking for a particular talent, then that can be an option. If the company is good enough, we might invest in them. So there was one company actually that we discovered through this program that we set up of a lot of different universities. It was called Velocity. We got together about like 10 or 12 different university entrepreneurship clubs, and they would come into Wayra once every couple of months to pitch, and then we would choose the best ones and actually invest in them. And now they're kind of raising, I think, about £1 million. So I think that's kind of one of the ways that we've chosen to collaborate. And then I think the last bit is, a lot of times, as I think other people have said, it's simply that people don't realize the resources that they have among each other. So just bringing together all of the entrepreneurs from a particular university so that they can kind of share best practices and even be inspired by one another, sometimes it's also really useful, because sometimes people are very disaggregated. It's kind of like people don't, even Oxford, for example, they've never done an event where all of the entrepreneurs across the different years have come together to see we are actually, this entity. There's something called Oxford Entrepreneurs. So we're trying to help them to kind of launch that first event.
Thanks for that, Gary. We're going to have to wrap up in the next minute, so just maybe some quick final observations from the rest of the panel, if they've got any.
Yeah, just to answer the question, we are trying to respond to a problem that we see in the market that is being articulated by many companies in the digital field. And they're saying that there are not enough people that specialize and understand digital marketing, for example. So what we're doing is we're working with universities and educating students to help them acquire the skills that they need in order to go into some of these businesses and help them scale. So we're doing this on a theoretical basis, and also we're giving them practical skills to go out and work with small and medium businesses, get first-hand experience. So this can be the pool that we tap into later on as a startup, as a business community. So that's one way of doing it. basically teaching students the skills that you will need as a startup later on.
Thank you so much for such great insights. Really appreciate it.
John, did you want to say something?
One final comment just directed to that question. For those of you who are interested in how you can work with the university and how they can help you, come talk to me.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, if I may, just final comment. You know, at Disco at Stanford, there is a logo saying like, if you want to do things, just do things. And you know, we can discuss many challenges here. Our ecosystems are facing, like here in Europe, in Belarus, or whatever. Everyone wants to build next Silicon Valley, but you know, there is no like a way. No one knows the way, the right way. We simply have to go and do things. And I encourage everyone to do things, to build your startups, and to change the world.
Thank you. Well, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for in this particular session. So thank you to all the panelists.